The text I've chosen for this afternoon then is Daniel chapter 2, the first 30 verses. Daniel 2, 1 through 30. Daniel 2, starting at verse 1. In the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His spirit was troubled, and his sleep left him. Then the king commanded that the magicians, the enchanters, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans be summoned to tell the king his dreams. So they came in and stood before the king. And the king said to them, I had a dream, and my spirit is troubled to know the dream. Then the Chaldeans said to the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the word from me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation, you shall be torn limb from limb, and your houses shall be laid in ruins. But if you show the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore, show me the dream and its interpretation. They answered a second time and said, let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will show its interpretation. The king answered and said, I know with certainty that you are trying to gain time, because you see that the word from me is firm. If you do not make the dream known to me, there is but one sentence for you. You have agreed to speak lying and corrupt words before me till the times change. Therefore tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can show me its interpretation. The Chaldeans answered the king and said, there is not a man on earth who can meet the king's demand. For no great and powerful king has asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or Chaldean. The thing that the king asks is difficult, and no one can show it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh. Because of this, the king was angry and very furious, and commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be destroyed. So the decree went out, and the wise men were about to be killed, and they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. Then Daniel replied with prudence and discretion to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. He declared to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree of the king so urgent? Then Arioch made the matter known to Daniel, and Daniel went in and requested the king to appoint him a time that he might show the interpretation to the king. Then Daniel went to his house and made the matter known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, and told them to seek mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that Daniel and his companions might not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision of the night. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered and said, blessed be the name of God forever and ever, to whom belong wisdom and might. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. To you, O God of my fathers, I give thanks and praise. For you have given me wisdom and might, and have now made known to me what we asked of you. For you have made known to us the king's matter. Therefore Daniel went in to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said thus to him, do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king, and I will show the king the interpretation. Then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste, and said thus to him, I have found among the exiles from Judah a man who will make known to the king the interpretation. The king declared to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, are you able to make known to me the interpretation, to make known to me the dream that I have seen and its interpretation?" Daniel answered the king and said, "No wise men, enchanters, magicians, or astrologers can show to the king the mystery that the king has asked. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Your dream and the visions of your head as you lay in bed are these. To you, O king, as you lay in bed came thoughts of what would be after this. And he reveals mysteries, made known to you what is to be. But as for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because of any wisdom that I have more than all the living, but in order that the interpretation may be made known to the king, and that you may know the thoughts of your mind." Beloved congregation of our Lord Jesus Christ, I think we've all met people who are rather self-confident, who come across as if they know it all, who might even believe themselves they truly are in the know, but in fact are not in the know. It's very frustrating. It can be anyway, to deal with such people with such an attitude. And sometimes these people can get a lot of people to look up to them, to follow them. They can have a tremendous amount of sway, and they can end up misleading many people quite badly. This can also develop into a group phenomena. An institution can act as if it knows it all. It is the authority, and then simply dismisses out of hand what others might have to say. For instance, governments that have been in power for quite some time. It's typical to happen, or government bureaucracies. There's always a danger for such cocky confidence to develop. And this is the kind of thing that we see happening in our passage for this afternoon. The wise men of Babylon, they make quite the bold claims about being in the know. But this time, Nebuchadnezzar smells a rat. And that sets the stage for two things. First of all, for Nebuchadnezzar to blow his stack. And secondly, that in turn sets the stage for Daniel to step forward, to proclaim to Nebuchadnezzar the sovereign wisdom and revelation and knowledge of God Most High, of the God of Daniel, the God of the exiles of Judah, indeed of our God. May proclaim God's word then under this theme. Our God reveals to mighty Nebuchadnezzar his sovereign wisdom. In doing so, he exposes the façade of the wisdom of Babylon, and he comforts his languishing people with the reality of his revelation. This morning, then, we saw how Nebuchadnezzar came to Jerusalem in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim. He took Daniel and his 3 friends to Babylon, enrolled them in a 3-year program at the university there in Babylon, and the 4 then graduated with top honors in their class. Now, Daniel 2 opens with another time indicator. In the 2nd year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar. Now, doing the math, Daniel and his 3 friends are midway their studies, but it's likely not quite the case. Even today, academic years are not exactly the same as calendar years. And the ways of counting the reigns of kings was apparently done differently in Israel and in Babylon. The Babylonians, in reckoning the reigns of kings, they started with year 0 instead of year 1. And Daniel and his 3 friends have likely just graduated and are now in the employ of Nebuchadnezzar. In verse 17, for example, it speaks of Daniel going to his house. In any case, Nebuchadnezzar has dreams. And these dreams did not just happen out of the blue. Verse 29, where Daniel begins to tell the king the dreams, look what it says in verse 29. To you, O king, as you lay in bed, some thoughts of what would be after this, and he reveals mysteries made known to you what is to be. The point is, he's laying in bed and he's pondering the future. Now, as you can imagine, this would be a very common thing for a dictator, one like Nebuchadnezzar, to do. If anyone had, and today too, has job insecurity, it's a dictator. He knows, dictators knew, there are many who would love to replace him. Assassinations at the time were happening all around. And conquered people would often seize any opportunity to rebel. Now, so far, Nebuchadnezzar, you could say, has done quite well. But Nebuchadnezzar knew, he's a sharp man, he always has to be vigilant. He had to constantly be planning and thinking things through, indeed thinking ahead. That's the life of a dictator. He had dreams. Literally, it says he dreamt dreams. In other words, while pondering the future of his empire and his kingdom, he suddenly dreamt dreams he dreamt like he'd never dreamt before. And Nebuchadnezzar knew right away, this is not just chance. Rather, this dream was specially vivid. He could recall it. It must have special meaning, particularly with respect to the future of his kingdom. And as a result, his spirit was troubled. His sleep left him. Even if he tried counting sheep, there was simply no way he could go back to sleep. He could just forget about the dream. Now, before we get into any further, let me highlight how verse 1 literally begins with the little word and. And in the second year. This ties chapter 1 and 2 closely together. And in this way, Daniel instructs his readers as they come into chapter 2 to keep in mind Daniel 1. And as we dive into chapter 2, we need to recall God did it. The Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar. God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the eunuchs. And the same applies now in chapter 2. It's not the case that Nebuchadnezzar just happened to have a dream. No, God specifically sent him that dream at that point while he was thinking about his kingdom. And God ensured that this dream would be something that Nebuchadnezzar had vividly in his head to the point that his spirit was deeply troubled. Our God, in fact, caused Nebuchadnezzar to logically think things through. And in this way, to become suspicious, logically suspicious. The wise men of Babylon, they claimed that they had special connection to the gods. the gods who had tremendous power and influence in the world, the gods who at times via dreams would give messages to people. They claimed, these wise men, they claimed they therefore also had the ability to interpret dreams. And therefore they claimed to be very valuable, especially to a king. They would give him vital advice as to how wars would go, as to where to expect unrest and rebellion in the kingdom. So Nebuchadnezzar then thought, if I get this message, then should not the wise men be getting this message as well? Are they not the people who are closest to the gods? And are they therefore not also in the know? And that he's been thinking this way comes out in verse 5. The wise men ask the king to tell the dream so that they can tell him what it means. And the king right away starts by saying, the word from me is firm. You can tell he's thought about this. If you do not make the dream known and its interpretation, you shall be torn limb from limb, and your houses shall be laid in ruins. So already by the time the wise men come into the presence of Nebuchadnezzar, he is deeply suspicious. He doesn't trust them anymore. You could put it this way, he smells a rat. Not that he has completely made up his mind about them. He adds in verse 6, but if you show the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. But notice how he reacts when they insist they need to hear from the king himself the dream. You can hear his voice rising. Now I know with certainty that you are trying to gain time because you see that the word from me is firm. And then he can't hold himself back any longer as to what he's been thinking all along. Verse 9, you have agreed to speak lying and corrupt words before me. Well, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves now. Nebuchadnezzar calls the wise men, and they, of course, have no idea what God has done to Nebuchadnezzar, about how he's worked in him to become suspicious about them. According to verse 2, the king called the magicians, the enchanters, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans. He called, in other words, experts from fields of knowledge and understanding out there. And this would have included experts in interpreting dreams, likely the Chaldeans. Very extensive dream manuals from that time apparently have been uncovered, manuals that only trained experts could navigate. And then Daniel writes very vividly, so they came in. You can just picture it. They came in and stood before the king. Daniel wants his readers, the Holy Spirit wants the readers, also us today in 2025, to just visualize the scene in our minds. It's impressive. There's the Babylonian intelligentsia, with all its branches, respected or represented by the well-known experts in each field, standing there before the great king, ready to counsel him and instruct him as to what he should do in order to handle situations. And now notice what they say. Verse 4, then the Chaldeans said to the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. Not, we will try, we'll see if perhaps we can figure it out. No, we will show it. Don't let your mind, don't let your spirit become all troubled, O king. We will figure out what the dream means. We will tell you what the future holds. Talk about a bold claim. But they face a real problem. Our God has planted suspicion in the mind of Nebuchadnezzar. But can we blame Nebuchadnezzar for being suspicious here? It's true, Nebuchadnezzar appears to be a brutal dictator. Ashpenaz, we saw that this morning, fears for his head, were Nebuchadnezzar to find out that Daniel and his 3 friends did not eat from the king's table or drink from the wine, but only had vegetables and water. Nebuchadnezzar, we also know what happened in chapter 3. He heats that furnace up 7 times when Daniel and his 3 friends refuse, or when the 3 friends refuse to bow down to that big golden image. You can read that in chapter 3. So Nebuchadnezzar is a brutal dictator. You could say a suspicious man, perhaps. But let's face it, his suspicions here, are they not logical? Aren't they well-founded? And if these suspicions he has, if they're true, well, think through the implications of that. You can imagine Nebuchadnezzar thinking here, I've been relying on these people to give me important direction in my kingdom, and I thought they were reliable. But isn't it all a facade? It's all a charade. I've been had. And for how long? And when will I come in big trouble because of this? They pretend to be loyal and to love me as their king. They speak wonderful words about me. But aren't they traitors? Are they not putting my whole kingdom at risk? And should not traitors be punished with the most severe judgment? At this point, recall also something else that we saw this morning. The kingdom of Babylon is the kingdom of Shinar. It represents, it epitomizes, you could say, the kingdoms of this world that have turned their backs on God. And therefore, in the bold claim of these wise men, particularly about the future, we hear the bold claims of the kingdoms of this world. Think about how the claims today are, in a sense, even worse. At least the wise men in our passage say that the source of their firm knowledge about the future, it's not themselves. No, they ultimately know this because they have access to the gods. But today, many speak about the future with the same boldness and the same certainty. Why? Because we figured it out ourselves. The way forward, for sure, is for any nation to have free abortion, to have euthanasia, to promote gender fluidity. That will make the world, that will make society a much better place. And woe to any bigot who dares suggest otherwise. You know, it's not that many years ago that pundits boldly and with great certainty proclaimed the world is going to experience another ice age. Many today revere Richard Dawkins. He boldly asserted that this world is on its way to becoming uninhabitable, never more to have a human race thriving upon it, even though God's word speaks of a coming paradise restored. Just a few years ago, many proclaimed it will not be long and religion will be no more in this world. That's the future. And what about when we die? Well, it's a settled fact. We know it for sure. When you die, that's the end. And there is nothing more. No, don't worry about any coming judgment. And at the same time, there also is no more life. It's simply, it's the end. How bold and how confident the claims that come from the kingdoms of this world. And now back to our passage. The wise men quickly find out, to their horror, Nebuchadnezzar is deeply suspicious of them. And they cried, "Oh, king, you cannot do this." Verse 10, "There's not a man on earth who can meet the king's demand." Once again, notice the bold assertion, the boldness of this assertion. "O king, we have access to the reigning gods of our day. And if these gods do not reveal to us the dream, then there is no one in all this world that can find this out." You see, in their thinking, there's no room for the sovereign God who can hear his people cry out to him, who can speak to his people. But now Nebuchadnezzar is furious. Verse 12, "Because of this, the king was angry and very furious, and commanded all the wise men of Babylon be destroyed." Now we can shake our heads at this Nebuchadnezzar. What a raving madman. But he has a point. These people speak with such confidence as if they know it all, but they don't. And in the process, because of that, many people are victimized. Again, think of our own day. Very bold claims abound. There is no God. And how many are led astray? There is no spiritual realm. Marriage is just an outdated social construct. No use going down that path. How many follow that advice? People are not binary. You can be whatever gender you want. They can even get surgery for that. There is no judgment coming upon this world. And as a result, so many people are hurt, are lulled to sleep, indeed are deeply victimized. So what happens? Well, verse 12, "The king commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be destroyed." And this is no laughing matter. Even the lives of Daniel and his 3 friends are now in deadly peril. At the same time, from the perspective today, we can indeed smile with this development. By means of a dream, our God, the God of that defeated nation of Judah, by means of a dream, our God is throwing the whole Babylonian Empire into deep turmoil by means of a dream. More than that, our God, he's setting the stage for the vindication of his name. As mentioned this morning in the common thinking of the day, when one nation defeated another nation, then the thinking was that the God of that nation defeated and was more powerful than the God of the other nation. And therefore Nebuchadnezzar thought he and his gods clearly had defeated very decisively the God of Judah, the true sovereign God, the God of heaven and earth. Well, our God is about to open eyes to a different reality. Nebuchadnezzar therefore gives the command to Arioch, "Round up the wise men, get rid of them. Away with the intelligence of Babylon. It's all devious, it's evil, it's a facade anyway." So Arioch has to go also then to the house of Daniel and his 3 friends. Now try to imagine for a moment if you were one of those 4 individuals. What would you do as Arioch knocked on your door? Would you not be tempted to cry out, "Lord, why are you doing this?" And that would not be a wrong question per se. But true faith keeps in mind, strives to keep in mind. True faith keeps in mind the sovereignty of God, even over generals, over powerful and brutal dictators. Keeps in mind how God can sovereignly work things out in amazing ways. And evidently, that's what Daniel remembers. He and his 3 friends already learned God had not abandoned them. God was not a defeated God who had given up on his saving kingdom. No, that's not their God. And therefore, when the knock comes to their door as well, Daniel replies with prudence and with discretion. He asks for some time. And then together with Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, he goes to the Lord in prayer. Note that the wise men and the intelligence of Babylon don't know where to turn anymore. But Daniel and his friends, they do know where to turn. They turn to God, the God of their fathers, the God of that special nation of Judah. They turn to him in prayer. And our God hears their prayer and reveals the mystery to Daniel in a vision of the night. And Daniel then blesses the God of heaven, and no wonder. Perhaps at another time we'll be able to get into the content of the dream itself. But at this point, let me simply say this. It would have been so marvelous for Daniel to see and to ponder that vision that Nebuchadnezzar saw. If you see what I mean, perhaps at the dinner table tonight, read Daniel, the next part of Daniel 2, about that vision. The kingdom that had defeated Judah itself was going to be smashed by a kingdom from heaven, a kingdom that one day would fill the whole earth. But even aside from that, Daniel now knew what none of those wise men, with their very bold claims pounded into them during their 3 years in the academy at Babylon, he now knew what none of them could ever know. And notice how he highlights 2 things in his thanksgiving song. Verse 20, blessed be the name of God forever and ever, to whom belong wisdom and might. Truly the God of Israel has the might, the power. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. That's something that Daniel 1 especially emphasizes. And truly this God of Israel, as the sovereign God, also has the wisdom. And that's especially what Daniel highlights in this song. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. And Daniel then goes to Arioch. Arioch, in turn, goes to Nebuchadnezzar. And notice what Arioch says to Nebuchadnezzar. I have found among the exiles of Judah a man who will make known to the king the interpretation. See, here's the hand of our God impressing upon Nebuchadnezzar, I am God. Nebuchadnezzar, do you want to know the future? No, don't consult the proud, the bold intelligentsia of Babylon. Instead, Nebuchadnezzar, go to Daniel. Go to one of my exiles of Judah. Nebuchadnezzar, there is only one who knows the future, and that is me, the God of my people Judah, whom I allowed you to defeat. I alone know the future. I have not hidden that knowledge either. Rather, I have spoken, I have given my word to my people, and thus they know, even though they are a defeated people, they are in the know. Nebuchadnezzar can't believe it, and thus asks Daniel in verse 26, "Are you able to make known to me the dream that I have seen and its interpretation?" And Daniel then takes the opportunity to underline, "No, Nebuchadnezzar, it is not me." In the words of verse 27, "No wise men, enchanters, magicians, or astrologers can show to the king the mystery that the king has asked. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days." That's what's going on. O king, your wise men got it all wrong. They boldly say no one can show it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh. But that is not true. God has revealed it. He has not left this world, but he's entered into this world of mankind. And you see, that really is what Christmas is all about. He even took on human flesh to live with us, to make known to us what is yet to come. How our God so conclusively exposes the facade of the bold claims of the wisdom of Babylon, the bold claims of the kingdoms of this world. What a message for Nebuchadnezzar to hear. He smelled the rat, but he was also confronted with the kingdom of heaven. And also, what a message for God's languishing people. Remember, they're in exile. What a message for them to hear as well. And that's our second point. You already mentioned the content of the dream would have been so comforting for Daniel and others then to hear as well. Particularly because that vision is about the latter days. You see that in verse 28. It's about our days. But for today, think of how comforting it was for Daniel and for all God's people at that time to receive that dream and to know its interpretation. The message is very clear. My people, don't worry. Don't be thrown by all the bold claims that come your way of the kingdom of this world. Rather, understand this. I am in the know, completely. And I have also put you in the know. No, not completely, but I've put you in the know. You are in the know. I have revealed myself to you. I've done so especially in sending my own son to take on human flesh. As the writer to the Hebrews puts it in those opening words, long ago, at many times, in many ways, God spoke to our forefathers by the prophets. But in these last days, that's our time, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he has appointed the heir of all things, and through whom also he created this world. This Son is the radiance of the glory of God, the exact imprint of his nature, and he upholds the universe by the word of his power. Knowing him, you know my plan of salvation. Knowing him, you know the wise ways of living in this world. The kingdoms of this world might deem these ways politically incorrect, might call them bigoted and who knows what else, but you know the truth. My ways are good. They are life-promoting. They're life-promoting for yourself, for society around you. And knowing him, you know the future. You know who has everything in control. In other words, it's my Son, the one who has come to you in the flesh. And you know what he will do as he reigns in these last days of the history of this world. He will cause kingdoms, hostile kingdoms, to rise and to fall. Think of the book of Revelation. That makes that very clear. And when all this happens, don't panic. Don't panic even if Arioch comes knocking on your door. You know what will happen also to yourself. True, many will boldly claim they are in the know about this. You will die, and then that's it. But my people, you know the reality. I never abandon you. I have spoken. You have my word. As the Apostle Peter says, you do well to pay attention to it as to a lamp shining in a dark place. As people try to intimidate you, as you perhaps stare at the cold, cold grave, you're in the know. Indeed, way more in the know even than highly educated scholars who do not know me. My people, hold to my word with confidence. Also into 2026, it comes from me. It comes from heaven. And realize what you have in it. I know my word is often branded as ancient, as old-fashioned, as just a record of religious feelings of people in the past. But the reality is this: because of my word, you have knowledge which is reliable, that you can build your lives on, that you can evaluate ideas with, that you can come to sound conclusions about. That in the end, everyone, even mighty Nebuchadnezzar and all influential people and world leaders like him, they will see one day as the truth. What a blessing in this dark world. Amen.